anybody that has been, I appreciate that, but, being realistic, I don't think there has been, but nonetheless, I just enjoy making videos just to make them, like it's just one of those things that, would it be cool if the channel like blew up and all of that? Yeah, that'd be really cool, but it's also one of those things that, making videos, especially whenever I'm like in the right like state of mind as far as like, being motivated and all of that, it can definitely, be hard to find that, motivation or whatever. I kind of lost my train of thought there for a second. But anyways, one of the things that I'm really into is motor racing, and I haven't really put up anything on my channel. Well, besides when I did the car mechanic simulator, which there's actually the new one out now, and I played a little bit of it, not too much. But I was kind of thinking about, putting up another video about that, because surprisingly, that video that I did with I don't know why I'm losing my train of thought so much today. The one I did with the car mechanic simulator, that actually ended up I think that's still the video on my channel that's got the most views. So that was surprising, but it's also really cool because, that's one of the things that I'm really into, but I never really thought of like, adding it to the channel or trying to like build my channel with that, And surprisingly enough, that was the most popular video, so I think that's kind of cool. It's almost kind of a way of me to be like, hey, you know what, just put the stuff out there that you like, and you'll come across other people that do. So that kind of leads me to today's video. I was really wanting to get a new video out, and I was like, okay, well, what do I want to do? Do I want to do something with gameplay, or, something, with gaming, which is kind of like what all my other videos have been besides when I did like the Dragon Ball stuff or whatnot. And I was like, okay, well, let's just go ahead and just, I think I'll get more enjoyment out of videos if I'm really passionate about the video, and I think that'll show through to people that are interested in it as well, and that'll, that kind of help build on that, if you get what I'm saying. I'm kind of rambling on it for a bit, but you get kind of my idea. So today what we're going to be doing is taking a look at some of the most famous cars from Ferrari for Formula One racing. I'm a really big fan of Formula One. I'm a really big fan of Ferrari. That is my favorite team. Michael Schumacher is my favorite driver of all time. He's the absolute GOAT. I respect Lewis Hamilton and all his accomplishments, but I just don't think I could ever say anybody is better than Schumacher. And anybody that knows anything about Michael Schumacher knows that he had a skiing accident in December of 2013, and he has since then been, he was in a coma, and then he came out of the coma in, I believe it was 2014, where then they let him return back to his home in Switzerland, and that's kind of where he's been ever since, and we haven't got any sort of updates on him. But as a Ferrari fan, I think that would be the absolute best thing in the world. And I mean, not even just as a Ferrari fan, just as, just as a human, you want to see somebody come out of that and be able to regain, any sort of normal life. I mean, it's just crazy to think about that. He's been basically, dealing with that for 10 years now, almost a decade, and we really don't know anymore that we knew when it all happened. So it's a very, very unfortunate thing, and I just hope that one day we'll get a chance to see Michael and hear him talk again, and just kind of return to normalcy, and that'd be really cool, so keep fighting Michael. You'll see, if you're ever on Twitter and you see anything regarding Michael Schumacher, that's pretty much the hashtag that everybody uses is, keep fighting Michael. So that's what we are saying as well. Keep fighting Michael. So let's go ahead and get started. So this page right here, shout out to supercars.net, where they have basically every car that Ferrari has ran through the F1 year, which you see there's a lot of them. And while I don't really have too much interest in like these older cars, I think they're cool for their time in history. And the one thing that I'll say about like this era of racing, I forget when it was, but I think like all the way through like the 50s and early 60s, or maybe even most of the 60s as well, these guys were racing without, seat belts. And if you look at some of these cars, there's really no sort of protection at all in them. So these were the days of, you didn't crash and walk away from it, unless it was something, very minor. But even minor stuff back then where, you blow a tire and you go off course. The tracks today aren't like the tracks they had back then. A lot of the tracks today have runoff areas. They have, gravel pits. They have a lot of things that can try to minimize if a car goes off the road and they're heading towards a wall or something like that. There's a lot of open space in some tracks and precautions in place to really make sure that the drivers are as safe as can be, and they are very, very safe now. If some of the crashes you'll see here in recent memory, the one that really stands out is the one Mick Schumacher just had here a few races ago in qualifying, and that was a nasty wreck. And of course Mick was perfectly fine, and that's something that if back in these days, that just wasn't a thing. I was listening to the Beyond the Grid F1 podcast with Jackie Stewart, where he was racing in the 60s and 70s, and I believe that he said it was 57 total funerals that he and his wife attended of people that they knew personally in racing that had lost their lives. So it's just crazy when you think about, that it really was every single lap back then. These guys were risking their lives because a lot of these tracks, as I was, kind of alluding to earlier, a lot of these tracks were just the road, and you would have, a forest of trees alongside them, or, something like that. They didn't have the debris walls that they have now, where, they actually have things for the stands. If a car wrecks and debris goes flying, it'll catch that. They didn't have that stuff back then, so I forget which, I think it was a Mercedes way back when, where it had a horrible accident, and the engine, the car went flying in the air, the engine went flying up into the crowd, and there was a lot of people that lost their lives just there watching the race. They're not even a part of it, they're just watching. But that kind of goes to show you, just how dangerous these cars were back then. Like Jackie, driving back then in 71 through 73. These cars have a really cool look to them, but also look how the driver is basically just setting in there. And then you get right here, the Jules car, which, let's see, I think it would have been, I'm trying to think of what year it was that Jules actually lost his life, but I want to say it would have been one of these right here. But he was completely thrown from the car. So that type of stuff, you wouldn't really have to worry about now. But back then, these guys were really, really putting their lives on the line every single lap. So I have nothing but respect for any of the drivers back then or even today. I mean, yes, the cars of today are a lot safer, the tracks are safer, and they've done a lot to protect the drivers. They really have. But I mean, you're still in a box of metal going, 200 miles an hour or whatever, So it's tough, but it's still, when you just look at these like machines, and they're basically works of art because just how different they are from each model to the next. I mean, they're so different, but they're all with the same goal. It's just to win races. But it's just cool when you see how different the designs and the philosophy and the chances that they were trying to take with these cars to try to get the most performance out of them as possible. So, let's take a look here. So, I'm just trying to see. Oh, so no, look, I was actually wrong. So I'm sorry, I'm not really good with dates, but looking here at the Ferrari 126 from the 82-83 season, this is the car that Jules was actually killed in, unfortunately. Let's see what it says. Provided itself to be quite competitive, and in the end won the Constructors' title. For anybody that doesn't know, the Constructors' title is the team title. So there's two titles that everybody goes for in Formula One every year. The Drivers' Championship, where the specific driver is the champion, and then the Constructors' title, where it's the teams overall. So the teams try to score points, and then whatever team has the most points, they can win the Constructors. So you can have it where a driver could win a world title, but they don't win the Constructors, and vice versa. A team can win the Constructors, but not win the world title. That happened to Ferrari, I believe, I think it was 99, where Michael Schumacher had broken his leg, and Ferrari was gonna win that title, but Michael broke his leg and had to miss the races. And then Ferrari made a strong push for Eddie Irvine to try to win the title, and he almost did, and they still won the Constructors. But it sucks. That was a year that it's crazy when you think about it. Michael Schumacher, even though he does have 7 world titles, which is tied for the most of all time with Lewis Hamilton, he very easily could have won 10 world titles. I mean, they got second in 2006. I'm a firm believer they would have won again in 2005, but the FIA and Ross Brawn has even said it himself, who now works for the FIA, that the rule that was implemented in 2005, where the teams could not change tires throughout the race, they could only run one set of tires throughout the race. The only way you could change is if there was a puncture or something like that. But the FIA had implemented that rule after Ferrari had won the world title 4 years in a row, and especially after the 2004 season, which was one of the most dominant F1 seasons of all time by a driver and team, where Ferrari just ran away with it. And the FIA had implemented that rule, which a year later after, they overturned it because it was ridiculous. You can't have cars with these type of how much performance is expected from them on these tracks, and how much those tires are being pushed for 70 laps or whatever it may be. It just doesn't make any sense to do that. But it was to slow Ferrari down, and it did. Ferrari had a horrible year in 2005, but nonetheless, that's a whole different story. But it's a fascinating thing to think about, the what ifs, when it comes to Ferrari's dominance, because they had one of the greatest dominant reigns of all time, and it could have been even better. So, that's something for another day. But let's say provided itself to be quite competitive, and in the end won the Constructors' title. It was a development of the previous model, but was 20 kilograms lighter. Jill's Villeneuve. I could be mispronouncing this right. I try to pronounce it the way I hear it in videos. Obviously, I was born in '92, and I didn't start watching F1 until here recently, or really getting into it in the history of it. So if I am mispronouncing that, I am incredibly sorry, but that's how I hear it pronounced in the videos and whatnot that I've watched, so that's how I pronounce it. But if I am mistaken, or say somebody please let me know in the comments. I don't want to sound like an idiot trying to pronounce, a very respected driver's name and one of the very highly revered Ferrari drivers of all time. So let's see, Gilles was killed. Pratt was killed. That's a weird way they have this wrote. Gilles was killed. Pratt, I think, is supposed to be killed in practice, and shortly after, Didier Pironi was severely injured in warm-up and had to pull out of the rest of the season. Whew. But again, these guys, I was listening to Nigel Mansell talk on the F1 Beyond the Grid, which that's a fantastic podcast. If you guys are F1 fans or wanting to get into it, that podcast is absolutely fascinating. But he was talking about it, that whenever you sign your contract with not only the Formula One teams, but with the engine manufacturers and the tire manufacturers, the sponsorships, like, it's all made very apparent to you that death is a possibility, and if that happens, it's all part of it. So you kind of go into it with that mindset of, hey, like, every time I'm going to work, I could lose my life, and that's crazy to think about for these guys. Like, you gotta have a lot of mental strength to be able to do that when you go to your job every day. It's not like, me or you or whoever, if you go to your job and you're sitting at an office desk and you kind of know what you're going to expect and how your day's going to go. But I mean, with these guys, even at the absolute peak of their skills and powers, I mean, it's just one thing can go wrong, and before you know it, you're in a bad situation. Is really the only way to sum it up, and they have to, deal with that every single lap, every single track. I mean, it's a lot when you think about what really goes into being a Formula One driver, or really any race car driver for that matter. Let's see. I know this was supposed to be about me going through the cars. I've kind of just turned it into just a random ramble about just certain things, but hey, that's kind of how it goes, and that's really kind of how my favorite videos are, when I find something that's about a topic I like, but then it kind of stays on topic, but you kind of learn stuff. So that's kind of how I got it. I'm sorry, I have a very squeaky chair. I'm hoping that it's not picked it up. So let's take a look here. I'm a big fan of the car that Mansell drove in '89. It's a very, very cool looking car. I love kind of how the nose kind of just like points straight down. And I don't know, just the low to the ground, the cars aren't like super big and like wide and bulky how they are now. The cars are faster than they've ever been, but they've also bigger than they've ever been. And I think there's absolutely nothing that looks better than the partnership that was with Ferrari and Marlboro. The Ferrari red with the Marlboro logo, I think, was just absolutely perfect. And of course, they had some issues later where Formula One wanted to get tobacco out of Formula One, so at first it wasn't at certain tracks, they weren't able to run it, and then just outright altogether they couldn't run it. And I wonder, we'll take a look here if we've seen it. So you can actually see here, right here, like the F2001, there's certain Ferraris that you'll see where you would normally see like the Marlboro, it's just all white. That is because certain tracks, they did not allow the tobacco sponsorships. So to get around that, they just left it white and kind of, what you would expect. And then once it was outlawed altogether, they tried to get around it by doing this right here. So if you see, it's like a barcode almost. So it's not the actual Marlboro logo. But when you're driving at high speeds, the way that it like looks to the eye, it could almost be made out to look like Marlboro. So it was the way they were trying to get around it without actually not having the sponsorship. And of course, eventually they just said no, that's not allowed either. And I believe Ferrari and Marlboro still have a partnership, but it's through like another, like one of the sub companies. It's not just Marlboro directly, but I was always a big fan of that, and I think that is just the most classic looking, livery that you could ever have is that Ferrari red with that Marlboro. I'm just such a big fan of it. So let's take a look, starting with, let's see, was it 96? I want to say 90, it was 96, the first year of Schumacher at Ferrari. 95 or 96, I want to say 96, I think 95 was when he won his last world title, his second world title with Bennington before coming over to Ferrari. And Michael actually did pretty well for Ferrari before, up until, because here's right here, the F2000 and all the way, through 2006. Yes, 6 was Michael's last car that he drove for Ferrari, which he got second place. But Michael did really good for, I guess, the situation, because he was competitive, and I believe he actually in 96, if I'm not mistaken, I believe he did actually win a race. And that was the big thing. Like, if you listen to Ross Braun and everybody that kind of really knows Michael and was involved in those decisions of getting Michael to leave Bennington, where he had just won 2 world championships, to join Ferrari, who admittedly were on a downswing and hadn't really done much. I mean, they were still alright, but 95 they got 3rd place, 94 they got 3rd place, so it was kind of, it was kind of like they could see the sun in the horizon, but they weren't quite there yet. And when Michael showed up, Jean Todt, it was Jean Todt, who said that there was all these, because he had got there before, I think he was actually there a year or 2 before Michael, because he's the one that brought Michael in. But when he got there, he said that there was all this issues of, they were saying, oh, well, we don't have the right car, we don't have the right drivers, we don't have the right this. They couldn't really pinpoint what had caused Ferrari to kind of slip and not, be able to continue their dominance and kind of be at the top where everybody always expects Ferrari to be. It's just, Ferrari, I'd say they probably have the most expectation of any team any year, because it's, hey, we're Ferrari, we're supposed to be one of the top dogs, and that's kind of the allure of Ferrari. I think that's why people, like drivers, say, driving for Ferrari is a dream for them, and driving the Ferrari cars is different than every other car, because there's so much history behind that brand and that prancing horse logo. So, but as you can see here, things were looking up for Ferrari in 1996. Michael Schumacher and Eddie Irvine drove for the team, and the F310 with its V10 engines, God, those V10s, proved to be a very competitive car, which couldn't quite catch the Williams, but showed Ferrari was on the right track, and on the right track they were, because they were back in it with a chance again. 1997, we're just going to kind of go through here and take a look at the cars from Schumacher's time, because that's my most favorite Ferrari period that I like to go back and rewatch because obviously of Michael, but that's probably Ferrari has a few golden eras or periods, but that one probably, I would say, if you ask any of the Tifosi, that's the one. But that's the one era that everybody looks back on. It's like, yeah, like Ferrari was far and above the top dog, and I think that's what every Ferrari fan wants to get back to. Now a lot of people don't like that, and it's funny that being on the flip side of it now, where you see a team like Mercedes and Lewis Hamilton essentially doing the same thing that Ferrari did in the early 2000s, where they had the best car, the best management, and they just won year after year, and it almost gets quite stale and boring. I guess I can see the flip side of that, but it's also, it's hard to not enjoy when your team's winning and dominating. It's kind of like Alabama football fans. I mean, it's like you never get tired of winning another championship or being talked about as the best. I mean, that's what you put all the work in for, and that's, as a fan, what you're rooting for. You want to see them win, so you never get tired of winning. But let's take a look at the 97 Ferrari F310B. Much more reliable than its predecessor, but suffered stability issues at the front. A new front wing assembly introduced shortly after Braun and Byrne joined the team improved the package. Schumacher won 5 Grand Prix and fought for the title in the last race with Jacques Villeneuve. Best result since 1990. Again, that's what I'd kind of alluded to earlier, that Ferrari had a couple seasons that they didn't win the title that they very, very easily could have if, they had some, a few different things go their way. Like in 99, if Schumacher doesn't break his leg, they would have won that title, and, but that was kind of a sign of things to come, because then, as we know, Schumacher would go on to win the world title 2001, 2, 3, and 4, so, and he could have won it in 5 and also 6, so it just goes to show you the consistent and the dominant era that was for Ferrari. So let's go on to 1998, and I hope the sound is alright on this. I've never held my microphone like this, but kind of the way that my desk is set up, it's just easier and more comfortable, so maybe the sound will be better, or I'll just prefer it, and this could be the way moving forward. But if it doesn't sound good, definitely let me know, and we can make the changes. So for 1998, new technical regulations for a 98 meant a totally new car for Ferrari. It was powered by the 3-liter Ferrari Tipo 047 V10 engine and designed around a narrower track with novel aerodynamic solutions by the technical team at Ferrari, leading to years of future success. 1998 saw Michael Schumacher compete for the world title again, narrowly missing out. This era right here, basically from 98 to 2006, even though if you take out this because of the rule changes, that was just not a good year for Ferrari. But basically from 97, because they won 5 Grand Prix in 97, so they were competitive and fighting in the title up until the last race. 97 to basically 2006, almost a decade of just dominance by Ferrari. And then we get to the 1999 season. The F399 was almost identical to the previous season's F3000, with small detail changes: a new front wing, wheel tethers, wasted side pods, and an improved exhaust system. The engine was the 048, which was lighter than the 047, with a bit more horsepower too. In 1999, Ferrari won the Constructors' title for the first time in 16 years and just lost the Drivers' title. Again, that's where Michael broke his leg and was very easily going to win that championship. And Eddie Irvine almost did as well too. Then we get the Ferrari F1 2000, one of the most, what's the word I'm looking for? One of the most well-known F1 cars of all time, because it's kind of like the start of the dominance. So I think all these cars in this period right here, because you see there was a big, I feel like right here from 98 to 2000, I feel like the cars are so different looking, even though they have they're very similar with the, the side pods and whatnot, but I don't know if these cars right here really look like, okay, this was the turn of the century and we're really going forward with, all the different innovations. So let's see what it has to say. The F1 2000 was a direct development of the F300 and F399 from the previous 2 seasons, using the same basic gearbox and a new engine with a wider V angle in the 048 engine, lowering the center of gravity, improving handling. It also featured improved aerodynamics over the F399. Ferrari won the constructor's title and Michael won the driver's title. And that would be a very familiar feeling for Ferrari for the next few seasons. So then we get to the F2001. The F2001 was designed around new regulation changes, which mandated a higher mounted front wing assembly to reduce downforce and saw the reintroduction of traction and launch control systems. This season was all Ferrari, with Michael Schumacher winning 9 races and his 4th World Championship, his 4th, 2 with Pennington, 2 with Ferrari, and it raced at the beginning of 2002. And then we get to the F2002, which is one of the most dominating race cars of all time. They won this season, and they had everything wrapped up incredibly fast. I mean, it was one of the F2002 is considered one of the most dominant cars of all time. That and the F2004, which we'll get to in a second. So let's see, the similarities with the F2001 were deceptive, as the new car had been totally redesigned and had much more performance. The chassis was new, much lighter structure. The new 051 engine was paired with a fused titanium gearbox. The result was another winning Ferrari, totally dominating. It raced at the beginning of 2003 also. Yes, this car was insane. I forget what the actual how fast it was that Ferrari wrapped it up, but it was something mad, where they were just like, they weren't even at the halfway point and Ferrari basically already wrapped up the title. And then we get to the F2003, which was also a very, very good car. Let's see, the thinking behind the car was the same as the F2002. Optimization of airflow, weight reduction, and lowering of the center of gravity. The rear end was revised and the suspension modified to get the best out of the Bridgestone tires. That would later be their downfall, would be those Bridgestone tires. The car won 7 races of 5 pole positions and 5 fastest laps, and provided a good base for 2004. 2004, in my opinion, is probably Schumacher's most dominant season, at least in my opinion. The dominant F2004 in 2004 was almost identical to its predecessor. The 053 engine was created to be as reliable as possible, as the new rules stipulated that it had to last twice as long as its predecessor. I cannot talk today. The center of gravity of the F2004 was lowered too. It was one of the most dominant cars in the history of Formula One. Yes, like this car is one of the absolute all-time great cars, and I feel that it would hold its own against absolutely any car of any era, especially if Michael's driving it. Then we get to the F2005, which this was when the FIA made the rule changes for the tires, and the Bridgestone tires were not made to go long stints. They were high performance and high grip, but also very high degradation. So and Ferrari's whole game plan at that time was multiple stops, lighter fuel loads, because they were just multi-stopping, but it worked out for them, and that was their strategy, and that's how their cars were built. So when you get to 2005, they change the rules to where you can't change the tires. Well, now Ferrari has a tire that cannot compete. It just falls apart. And Ross Brawn even said it himself in the Beyond the Grid podcast episode that they did for Michael Schumacher's 50th birthday, where they were talking about Schumacher in those years, that they were getting lapped or in the back of the grid with cars that just a year previously they were lapping, and it's just really, really unfortunate that was what happened to Ferrari at that time, because the car was not bad. It's just the wheels couldn't compete, and then they got rid of that rule only like a year later, because it was absolutely ridiculous for Formula One. So Ferrari and Ferrari fans very rightfully look back at that car with just kind of bitterness, I guess would be the way to put it, because that really knocked Ferrari off a peg that they kind of never really recovered from, at least to get back to that winning way. And it was just over a stupid rule change, but it was also because Ferrari had been so dominant. So it's kind of like, yeah, we got a horrible rule, but it was also because we had got to enjoy so much success. So you got to look at it from both sides of the sport. So, but this is the last Ferrari F1 car to feature a V10 engine. Very sad for F1 fans. Yes, it is. There's nothing quite like that sound of a V10 engine screaming. And I'm about to be eating dinner, so I hope my mic doesn't pick up my stomach growling. But let's say, unfortunately for Ferrari, the F2005 was not nearly as successful a car as its predecessors, able to win only a single race all season. And it's funny because I think the race they won, they had it was early in the season, and they had 2 back-to-back weekends where it looked like everything had kind of like got solved. But as Ross Brawn had put it, it was kind of like a false hope, because then it was kind of something they were chasing all season, because they thought, yes, no, we can win, and it just wasn't. And those were just like 2 back-to-back tracks that happened to be good for their tires, and they had won that race. I mean, I think like the next weekend or whatever, or the weekend previously, they had got like second, or they had 2 really good weekends in a row that season, and they kind of like thought, okay, we can salvage this, and it just never happened. Let's say the 2005 ended up being Ferrari's single worst season since 1995, so again, a decade. Renault and McLaren beat Ferrari up. Yes, they did. But, I mean, McLaren, that probably felt really good for McLaren, because we did a pretty good beating on McLaren in the early 2000s. So, let's see here. Then we get to the F2006, where Ferrari did pretty well, and they finished second in both the drivers and constructors title. And that was the last time that we saw Michael drive the Ferrari. So let's see, the 248 F1 welcomed back the V8 with a 2.4-liter Screamer. The car was an update of the previous year's F2005 in terms of chassis. Although the V8 engine is shorter than the V10 used in the F2005, the wheelbase is actually the same. Ferrari won 9 races and came second in both drivers and constructors titles. That was a very, very good year for Ferrari, but it was tough, because we knew that was the end of Michael and kind of like the end of that era. And it's sucks when, that's kind of, it's like Michael Jordan leaving the Bulls, or, Tom Brady when he left the Patriots, even though he did come and join the Tampa Bay Bucks, which I live in Tampa Bay, so that was awesome. But it's always weird because, you're kind of, it's the end of an era, and it's always weird. So let's see, we gotta be up there in time. Yeah, so we're at about 40 minutes. We still got other cars to go through, but you know what, I think that we could kind of stop it here, and if everybody likes this video, we'll go on and do the Ferrari after Schumacher type era, because I really just did the Schumacher era today, like the mid 90s to the mid 2000s, but there's so much more, like, obviously, like, there's so much history in every single one of these cars, and all the stories about Enzo Ferrari, and I mean, there's just stuff you could go on for days and days, and like almost an hour now just talking about just a 10-year period basically. So I really hope you guys enjoyed this video. It was definitely enjoyable for me to be back and be doing another video. I went through a lot of personal stuff, with the losing of, I lost my grandmother here recently. I went through COVID, which I had. My dad just recently got cancer as well. And I went through a breakup during all that as well, which was not easy. It was pretty hard, but thankfully, I used all that time, or everything that's happened in that time, basically since the last time I uploaded, is trying to focus on, or find things in my life that were really leading to unhappiness and kind of affecting me as a person and really changing my personality, or kind of, who I wanted to be. So it was a lot to go through, and it was very tough, but also I feel like it has improved me as a person, because I did come to the realization of, okay, I'm absolutely miserable at what I'm doing for work, and it really affected me. And I would say that that would be the number one thing that, if I could attribute to my relationship, for example, that didn't work out, and it didn't really work out because of my fault, because I was so burnt out. I was so just like angry at the job that I had. So one of the big things that I did was said, okay, you know what, I'm gonna find the things in my life that are making me unhappy and just eliminate them. So I had quit my job. I didn't have a backup plan. I just said, you know what, I'm gonna figure it out. I'm gonna just do it. And it actually ended up being a great decision for me, because I ended up now getting a job that I absolutely love. Like, I've been doing it for, about half a year now or so, and so, like, the honeymoon phase of it would have worn off by now, but I absolutely love it. I love the people I work with, and I can say that I am, a happy person now. My day-to-day overall is very happy. Is there stuff I would like to change? Absolutely. I wish I could, change stuff about my relationship or whatever, but I try to not kind of live like that, kind of live like, oh, well, let me beat myself up about decisions I made that I can't change now. It's just like, hey, okay, I made these choices then, and these are the, consequences that I have now of it. But, trying to improve myself out of the whole situation, that was the biggest thing I've taken away from it, and that's kind of my mindset for every day. So I'm not going to ramble on, but anybody that kind of wanted to know kind of what led to me not uploading and kind of what's going on since then, that's kind of it. So I really had a lot of fun making this video. I hope that you guys enjoy it. You enjoy the topic. I hope, I can bring some Formula One fans to my channel. There's not a lot of ASMR Formula One stuff, so I'm hoping that maybe I can try to, like start growing that a bit. So that'd be really cool to see some of the fellow Formula One fans, or just motorsport racing in general. You guys can probably see behind me over in here, we got like a bunch of different NASCAR memorabilia and stuff like that. So I might make some videos on, some of the model cars and stuff that I have. I'm undecided there, but either way, I look forward to making another video for you guys soon. It has been wonderful to be back behind the microphone, and I hope everybody is safe, everybody is happy, and if you take anything from this is, if there's something in your life that is really making you unhappy, or, changing stuff about you that you don't, then do whatever you can to eliminate that and focus on the stuff that makes you happy, and it'll really do wonders for you. It really will. Like when I look back at some of the days that I had whenever I was just completely, I was almost like depressed, thinking about going to work and stuff like that, and the type of person that I was, like, in my relationship, and the type of person that it turned me into, like, I really hate looking back on it, because it really makes me sad as far as how I let everything go. But it's one of those things that is all I can do from now is grow and try to better myself, and I hope that's what everybody else will do if you have a similar situation. But enough of me rambling. I appreciate any of you guys that watch any of my videos, and I look forward to doing another one. Until then, you guys have a good